Okay, like I said, we're going to stick this on YouTube right afterwards. If you come up here and talk fast. And you go through, I got up this morning. I don't ever do anything last minute. This was the last 2 hours. Okay, so think about it, what I want to talk about. A lot that I'm going to be talking about is the new people here that I fly with. You've probably heard this a whole bunch of times. The older people, you forget about this. So we're just going to go through lots of those little things that you ought to be doing every time you go fly. In the end, I'm going to go through some accidents. I'm going to go through the accident history for soaring in 2014, and I'm going to go through one accident kind of in more detail. And so anyway, here's my presentation to make it multimedia. And the first thing I want to start off with ground ops. And one of those reasons that one thing that we've done that we have recently is beating up the wing on Mike Golf. We've kind of taken care of that, but I think it's kind of an interesting little thing of why we put a hole in Mike Golf's wing. And if you think about it, there's no one particular reason. It's a bunch of them. We needed room in the hangar. The hangar has a little bit of slope. The nose gear was a little bit off on pressure. People were pushing up on the top, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a classic story of how accidents really occur. There's not one reason. It's a chain of events, 7 or 8 or 9 things, and all of a sudden, you got a whole wing. So in my view, safety is recognizing that chain of events as early as possible, and not letting it come to the conclusion. And to tell you the truth, that's how I'm alive today. A lot of time in fighters, and I do not agree with the old saying, safety is paramount. That's BS. The safety is a vital part of the mission is paramount, and in order to perform the mission, you have to do it in a safe manner. And if you don't do it in a safe manner, you can't get the mission accomplished. So out here, our mission here is to go flying because it's fun. But you better be thinking about safety every single step along the way, and all the people I've trained here. Dominic would be the best example right now. I mean, he knows we've talked about hundreds of things with safety, not just flying techniques, but safety things, over and over and over again. And I just beat him into his head, and they're now part of his nature. So here's some things in the ground ops I'm just going to bring up. One thing is that you've got a toolmobile, grab a radio too. We've got 4 radios out here. The radio in one toolmobile kind of works. Of the radios that we have, there's 2 of them look like this, and they're kind of like squarish sides. They're kind of mediocre type radios. The radios that work is our original squarish type radios, kind of got sharper angles on it, and this other one that has that, but it's kind of it's more roundish. Okay, so when you need a good radio, grab one of these 2. If you just need a backup that's fuzzy, whatever, grab one of these other. Okay. Winds. We're in the windy season, although it really hasn't been that terrible so far. But some things to think about: ground handling with winds. We all know you put the wheel on the down one side, and I never put that wing over anything, or I don't ever put the non-wheel wing over anything. Like I don't let it go over these lights because you just know you're going to get a gust and take out the wing. So I'm not paranoid, but I do all these things so that to stop that chain of events. Canopies, you don't leave when you walk away from the plane. The canopy comes down and is locked. I mean, when you walk away from the canopy, it comes down and is locked. You don't leave the canopy out. The exceptions to that, L23 rear canopy, I can leave that up because it's not the same as the other ones. And the Mike Lima canopies have a strut on them, which helps a little bit so you can go a little bit further. But the other canopies don't. And a little gust of wind, thing slams. That's it's the most fragile part of the airplane. And several people can speak from experience. They're expensive to replace, unbelievably expensive. With the aircraft, with some of these high winds, you down the end of the runway, and you don't leave the plane down there, but there are circumstances where you just have to leave the plane for a little while. What you do, put the spoilers out, put the belt around the stick, tighten it up on L23, tighten it up, put the, to pull the stick back, put the belt around the spoilers to pull the spoilers out. Take the parachute, stick it on the wingtip, try to spoil the ability of that plane to fly. And just avoid that situation, but there are sometimes you're not going to, otherwise you'd be sitting down the runway, you landed by yourself, there's no way around. You can't stay there all night, so you just have to leave, but try to minimize that. Okay, any other thing on ground ops? Okay, we're changing a tire today. There's thorns all over this place. The places with the least amount of thorns, not no thorns, but the least amount, are the taxiway and runway. And then the next are the dirt runways, but they're not, they still have thorns on them. So when you're running around, kind of do a FOD check for thorns. You see any thorns in the areas that we go grab them and throw them someplace else. Because we're playing with these tires all the time. And Mike Lindman might not come up today because of it. When you pull off the runway at the, come off at the dirt and the main runway intersection, or come off at one of these taxiways. Avoid as much as possible pulling off the runway any other place because it's full of thorns. Okay? Take off. Yeah, go ahead.
Keep the lights on
the golf carts. Put yellow lights. We also have two more lights here. Actually, those are old bank ones. I think we get a couple LED lights. They're pretty cheap. Tractor Supply, I think about $25 a pop. And stick it on your vehicle. If you need to take your vehicle around here, put a yellow light on it and take a radio. You're not going to drive around here without that. Okay, a couple things on the takeoff. We do the go thing sometimes where you don't go all the way out to the runway. When you get out of the runway, just say go and take off from there. If you do that, think about where your wingtip is going to be when suddenly the tow plane starts dragging. So here's the runway. We're going out right here. The plane's right here. The tow plane's right here, and then you say go. Especially if you have wind right here. As you say go, you're going to turn that way. The wind's going to hit your tail and turn you more that way. And what do you know? There's runway lights and stuff right there. You take out your right wingtip. So just, if you do that, make sure you are at a point where that's not going to happen. Okay? Hasn't happened yet. Try to catch it. Actually, we had a close call when we were doing the thing with the cap a year and a half ago. And so just think about that if you're going to use that technique. I use technique all the time, but just delay it a little bit until you know that's not going to happen.
Lance, another thing about that is, like in the illustration that you have there, when you say go, as soon as the tow plane applies power, what's going to happen is that the rope is going to basically pull the tail very strongly to the right, which brings the nose very strongly to the left. And now the tow plane's heading for the weeds. Now we're heading for the edge of the runway. Ideally, the tow plane needs to be a lot closer to the center line of the runway before we apply power, because if it's way off like that, what we end up having to do with the tow plane is we're dragging a lot of that inside brake just to try to keep the nose somewhere close to the pointing down the runway, and that's hard on the brakes, and it's also hard on the co-pilot's nerves.
Like everything else, it's the 6 P's: poor planning prevents piss poor performance. It's kind of nice. What? Probably the 7 P's. So that's a good point. I like that. It's nice to the pre-brief. But the pre-brief can take 2 seconds. it's kind of like just tell the tow pilot that that's what you're going to do, and so he knows that you're ready for it. Okay, canopies. If you fly with me, you'll hear me harp on the canopies. Canopies are down, locked, and checked. It's not, oh, I'm going to put the canopy down. Nope, that doesn't count. You don't put the canopy down. You put the canopy down, you lock it, and you check it. And if you don't do all three, you've done 0, so you start over again. There's certain things like that in airplanes that you do all the steps or none of the steps. And if you get interrupted, what happens? Although that chain of events, you get interrupted. You got it down, you locked it, oh, I got to call them. You didn't check it. So now you don't go back and check it. You do the whole thing over again. That's how you stay out of trouble. The guys who've flown dozens of years, I'm sure you agree with that. I also talk about, we look like you come here soaring, it looks like, yeah, everybody out of the airport goes walking around the runway. No, in fact, how many times have you stepped on a runway at Holloman? Okay, you probably never will. And I say there's all kinds of pilots that have never walked down this runway out here. We all go out walking down that runway. But that runway is an inherent dangerous thing, so you don't just go walking on the runway. You're looking that way, you're looking that way. If you're out on the runway, you position yourself so you can see short final. That is not the place to hang around if you want to have a long life. And so, the other thing is that if there's other people out with you, your guests, you're in charge of your guests. Tell them, okay, they can come out for a moment, and round them up, and get them off that runway. Okay? Aircraft, I see some people just helping out by picking up the wing. You don't pick up that wing until you're instructed to by the pilot. And the real quick instruction is, that's all there is. Thumbs up meaning I'm ready. The wing comes up level. That's an indicator to all the tow pilots here that, okay, we're ready to do this, whether it's a taxi or takeoff, whatever the step is, they're ready for it. They see it because your wing's level. If you put a wing down, they stop, because that's not where it's supposed to be. Okay, so don't, if you're out there trying to help, do not pick up that wingtip until you're told to. Rope near tow plane, I see this a few times. Hopefully all the tow pilots and everybody else is thinking about this. But, you know, we're driving around doing loops. Here's the tow plane out there, sitting there, and here's the rope behind me kind of going like this or whatever. We do not want that rope anywhere near that prop. Okay? Anywhere near that thing. So think about that when you're out dragging that rope around. So like yesterday, I was looking this up on the runway a couple of times. Yeah, I grabbed the rope and I walk, I don't know, 20 feet away from the wingtip before I start doing my dragging and stuff. You do not want that rope near that prop. Hopefully we're all watching that thing out there. The other thing, obviously, none of us go near that prop either. The only time we go by the tow plane a lot, we come from behind it and behind the wing and no further than that, straight out that wing. But when you have people around with you, you make sure that you're in charge of those people. You don't let them near that tow plane, okay? And because if you're just watching, it looks like we have a cavalier attitude. Yeah, we're just kind of walking around, throwing this rope around. Yeah, that's not what we're doing. We're paying attention to all these things. Okay, rope brakes. You hear me talk about rope brakes all the time. We practice it. Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
Before you get off the ground, can you talk about two things with wind runners particularly? One is, the wind runner is by far the best person to check for traffic before they and I see some few that really don't. Okay? And particularly when somebody's way out there coming straight in, they don't need to be. The wind runner is by far the best person.
He's got the best view, and I'm glad you brought this up because I'm going to talk more about him here too. The guy who has the worst visual lookout is the pilot, is the tow pilot. Yet he's the guy pretty much in charge of the operation, but he has the worst view of things. Don't ever forget that. The next one in the air is the glider. We have the best view. And but on the ground, now part of my deal pulling out of the runway is I look up there on final. Because the other thing I have is a radio right here, but the other thing that instantly stops every tow plane too is a yellow handle right here. You pop the rope and the tow plane feels it and they all just stop right then. And it's just natural. So, and then the wing runner, You really ought to have a radio with you when you're doing this. Because you're in charge of operations on the ground, you should have a radio with you so you can see these things. And again, if you don't like something, you drop that wing, it stops. The operation stops. So know how you can stop things very quickly. Okay?
Second thing?
Yes.
Yeah, I preached this before, but wing runners, if you're the tow pilot and you're doing this way, I can't see anything you can do. Okay? Do your hand across you, then I can see what you're doing.
Right.
Okay? And if you start going like this, what am I going to say? I'm thinking it's time to take off. Okay? So be definite about how you're doing.
Good. Another thing is that the way that we have the mirror oriented in tow plane is they can see the runner on the right wingtip well. If he's on a left wingtip, they really can't see him. So don't get on a left wingtip. But sometimes when we're operating on the other runway on 03, out there I go over to the right wingtip, even though it's kind of like out of the way, because that's where they can see you. They can't see you on the left wingtip. Okay? Rope brakes. Before we take off, what I teach is that as we're pulling on out here, there's a sock there, a sock here, and a sock here. We can see both these socks. Of course, they're pointing different directions. Never seem to be all the same. But that is how to get ready for things is it's that 6-7P thing. And you just get it up in front of wherever it is in your brain. So you go out there and you say, okay, we got winds coming from the left. So what that's going to do, the takeoff is initially when I don't have any control, so the plane's naturally going to go in the wind, but I'll get out of control. Then when we get up, break the ground, it's going to push us downwind, so I'll step on the rudder, come back up. So that kind of stuff that we all talk about. Well, the other thing is, okay, it's a left crosswind. Just establish that. And then the next thing you do is, okay, if we've got a rope brake below 200 feet, we're landing straight ahead. Above 200 feet, we're going to turn into the wind, come on back around. Unless we're establishing the turn, we'll just continue that turn. Above 500 feet, we come back for a modified landing. So I just want to talk about a couple of those things. First one is the straight ahead rope brakes. I think it's the fastest thing you got to do in a glider, in an emergency situation, besides by the time we don't have any wings left. But you have to make a decision. Are you going to be able to land on the remaining runway or the cleared out area? The remaining runway, I include the overruns and everything. So I kind of look at it as if you can hit the last spot on the paved runway, you'll be able to land on the runway, although the rest of it's going to be in dirt. So if you're going to make that decision, hey, there's room, then it's spoilers out, nose down, get down the runway, bleed off the energy, touchdown, full brakes. And it's quick. If you kind of go, no runway in front of me anymore, it's time to just take your time and look around, pick the spot that you're going to put that plane into. But it's not going to happen for another 2 minutes probably. It's going to take a little while. So give yourself time, take your time, find the spot.